we saw Steve Jobs paint a grand blueprint for Apple's future, and also witnessed his tender side in the family. But it takes time to turn that blueprint into reality. And time was the most luxurious thing for him, the thing he was running out of fastest. Cancer cells, the enemy he'd beaten back twice, came back again. This time, there was no more miracle. The battle entered its irreversible, final third round. In the summer of 2011, Jobs was extremely weak. He spent most of his time in bed, relying on morphine to fight off the excruciating pain. But his brain just refused to stop working. He still reviewed Apple's future product plans at home and gave suggestions for revising the marketing strategies. His body was withering away, but his mind was still as sharp as a blade. During this period, he did something that surprised a lot of people. He invited Larry Page, the founder of Google and his biggest competitor, to his home. He didn't mention that thermonuclear war anymore. Instead, he was like a legendary master about to retire, passing on his last bit of wisdom to a young apprentice. He advised Page to stay focused, figure out what kind of company Google wanted to be, and never become as bloated and mediocre as Microsoft. This didn't seem like a business meeting. It was more like a reconciliation beyond grudges, a titan of the industry giving his last words of advice to the world after him. In August, Jobs' health took a nosedive. He finally, painfully admitted that he could no longer fulfill the duties of Apple's CEO. He called his wife, Laureen, and dictated that short but powerful resignation letter that would later shock the world. In the letter, he wrote, "I've always said that if there ever came a day when I could no longer meet my duties and expectations as Apple's CEO, I would be the first to let you know. Unfortunately, that day has come." On August 24, 2011, Apple's board members were summoned to Jobs' home in Palo Alto. In the living room, Jobs officially handed in his resignation. He strongly recommended Tim Cook to take over as CEO, and the board unanimously agreed. He also asked to be the chairman of the board, a position he'd only hold for a mere 43 days. On this day, the Jobs era at Apple officially came to an end. After resigning, Jobs started to arrange his goodbye. He invited his old friends and colleagues like Bill Campbell and Joni Ive, one by one, to his home for those final long talks. He also kept meeting with his biographer, Walter Isaacson. He hoped that through this book, his kids could get to know the real father who hadn't always been by their side. His life was slipping away right before our eyes. He couldn't even go downstairs and spent all day in his bedroom. But even in these last days, he was still the Jobs we knew, crazy about design to the core. When the hospital sent new medical equipment, he'd throw a fit because he thought the monitor's design was too complicated and the oxygen tube's material was uncomfortable. He'd even draw the design sketches he thought were better with his own hands. At the very last moment of his life, all he thought about was how to make the world a more beautiful and simpler place. His family surrounded his bedside, his wife, Laureen, his sister, Mona, and his kids. Suddenly, he opened his eyes. He stared at each of his kids for a long time, one after another, then at his wife, Laureen. Finally, his gaze seemed to pierce through them and look into the distance beyond. According to his sister, Mona Simpson's record, he used his last bit of strength and clearly said the same thing 3 times in a row. "Oh wow! Oh wow! Oh wow! Oh wow! Oh wow! Oh wow!" After saying that, he closed his eyes forever. What did he see? Was it the creations of his life, the time spent with his family, or that unknown scene at the end of life that none of us can ever know? No one has the answer. This last riddle he left for the world is as thought-provoking as the great products he created. Steve Jobs passed away on October 5, 2011, at the age of 56. Just one day before his death, Apple released the iPhone 4S. That was the first important Apple product launch without him. He didn't get to see one of his last masterpieces come out, but the legacy he left behind has changed the world forever. He lost the third-round battle, but his life had long transcended victory and defeat. We bid farewell to Steve Jobs. Although a person's physical body will perish, their thoughts can be immortal. How exactly did Jobs think? What were the core principles that allowed him to revolutionize the world time and time again and create the Apple miracle? In Jobs' view, the third circle of hell in Dante's Inferno is reserved for souls guilty of gluttony, those greedy, bloated, indulgent, and unfocused souls. He believed that many real-world companies, like Xerox and later Microsoft, fell into this hell. Jobs' life philosophy was to do everything possible to prevent himself and Apple from falling into this third circle. Jobs' most powerful weapon was focus. When he returned to Apple in 1997, his first move was to draw a simple 4-box matrix on a whiteboard and cut 70% of the company's product lines. Behind this was his famous subtraction philosophy. He once said, "People think focus means saying yes to the thing you've got to focus on. But that's not what it means at all. It means saying no to the 100 other good ideas that there are." At Apple, every product approval meant dozens of equally appealing projects were killed. This harsh trade-off ensured that Apple could focus all its top resources on a few world-changing products. This focus was ultimately reflected in the products. The iPod had only one dial, and the original iPhone had only one home button. This wasn't just about having less, but rather ultimate simplicity distilled after conquering countless complex functions. Jobs firmly believed that the quality of a company depends entirely on the quality of its talent. He had a well-known theory: A players want to work only with other A players. He thought that once you tolerate a B player on the team, they'll bring in more B players and even C players, leading to a bozo explosion, and the real A players will leave. To maintain this elite environment, he adopted a brutally honest management style. He never sugar-coated things. If he thought your idea was garbage, he'd tell you straight up, "This is garbage." In his view, this was the greatest respect for A players, because truly excellent people would rather hear harsh truths than waste time on false pleasantries. This style, though controversial, helped Apple screen and retain a group of the top geniuses. This is the most core aspect of the Apple model and the most out of step with the entire industry. Jobs believed that to create a great user experience, you must have end-to-end vertical integration of every product aspect, from chip design A, series chips, to hardware manufacturing iPhone, iPad, to operating system development iOS, to app distribution App Store, and finally to terminal sales and service Apple Store. Apple tightly controls every link in the chain. This stands in sharp contrast to Google's Android open model. Jobs thought that openness only leads to fragmented and compromised experiences. Only a closed, hardware-software integrated ecosystem can create that seamless, magical experience. This is a profound control philosophy and the fundamental reason why Apple products are easy to use. The reality distortion field is the most well-known term to describe Jobs. It refers to Jobs' powerful personal charm, persuasion, and willpower, which could make those around him believe that anything was possible and take on seemingly impossible tasks. This field was the catalyst for Apple's miracles. It made engineers install a smaller hard drive in the iPod and got Corning to restart the Gorilla Glass production line in 6 months. But this field is also a double-edged sword. When misused, it becomes a dangerous form of self-deception. The most typical example is that he initially refused cancer surgery, believing he could beat the illness with diet and willpower, which ultimately cost him his life. This field both made him great and led to his tragedy. Besides these, there are also principles like starting from the user experience, working backward on technology, despising market research, and trusting intuition. But ultimately, all these principles point to a common belief: technology itself has no life. It's the combination of technology with humanities and art that can create value that makes our souls sing. This is the most precious intellectual legacy that Jobs left to Apple and the world. He spent his life fighting mediocrity, complexity, and that third circle symbolizing indulgence and bloat. The life of Steve Jobs has come to an end. We've talked about his childhood confusion, the passion in starting a business, the pain of being ousted, the glory of his return, and his final battle with illness. But when all the products become history and all the stock prices turn to dust, what exactly did he leave for this world? Jobs' world was a world of binary opposition. In his eyes, people were either geniuses or idiots. Products were either the best in history or a pile of junk. He stood at the intersection of two worlds. He was a hippie who believed in Eastern Zen, and a capitalist who pursued maximum profit. He was an artist in pursuit of perfection and a merciless engineer. This strong dualism perhaps stemmed from the most hidden corner of his heart, his experience of being adopted. He once told the author that the feeling of being abandoned by his biological parents made him extremely eager to control everything around him, while the experience of being chosen by his adoptive parents made him feel that he was different, a chosen one. This feeling of being abandoned and then chosen shaped the driving force of his life. Both the fear of being abandoned and the firm belief in his own uniqueness. As a person who spent his whole life exploring the meaning of life, how did Jobs view death and faith? He didn't believe in any specific religion. But in the last days of his life, he told the author that there was a 50% chance he believed in the existence of God. He said, "I've seen many dying people. I don't like to think of human life as just an on and off switch. When the switch is off, everything is gone. That's really depressing." He preferred to believe that the wisdom and consciousness we accumulate would somehow remain after death. Otherwise, all this struggle and creation would seem meaningless. This might be an open-ended answer he left for himself and the world. What was Jobs' greatest product? Was it the Mac, the iPhone, or the iPad? In his own view, it was none of them. He thought that his greatest creation was Apple Inc. itself. He saw too many great companies decline rapidly and lose their soul after their founders left. So, his greatest pride was building an organization with a unique culture. An organization that could keep creating great products even after he was gone. An organization that could last for a long time. The cornerstone that supported this organization was the creed he adhered to throughout his life: the intersection of technology and the liberal arts. He firmly believed that only by perfectly combining the most advanced technology with the beauty of poetry and art, and a human-centered experience, could one create products that truly touched people's hearts. This was the secret of what made Apple Apple and the most precious legacy he left for the company. In Jobs' life, a magazine called The Whole Earth Catalog had a profound influence on him. In his famous 2005 Stanford University commencement speech, he mentioned the last issue of this magazine. He looked back on his life and how those seemingly unconnected dots, like the calligraphy classes he audited after dropping out of school, became valuable assets when he designed the first Macintosh. He told the graduates, "You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So, you have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever." Finally, he quoted the farewell message on the back cover of the Whole Earth Catalog to end his speech. To summarize his own life and to leave it as the last motto for all the dream chasers in the world. That message was, "Stay hungry. Stay foolish." This is Steve Jobs' legacy. It's not a device, nor a piece of code. It's a belief. The belief that those crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who actually do. Be hungry for knowledge and absorb everything around you. Be foolish enough to always keep the curiosity of a beginner to explore the unknown. This might be the best gift this world-changing madman left for all of us. Hey friends, when we reach the last chapter legacy of Steve Jobs' story, it seems like we've got a full grasp of his life. But at the end of this biography, the author, Walter Isaacson, who had over 40 in-depth interviews with Jobs in the last 2 years of his life, shares some of his personal feelings. He tries to draw the final sketch of this complex giant we're already familiar with. This is the epilogue of the whole book. Isaacson recalled that in 2004, Jobs himself called him and invited him to write a biography. Isaacson declined at that time, thinking Jobs was still in his prime and it was too early. It wasn't until 2009, after Jobs' liver transplant, that his wife, Lauren, called Isaacson. In a calm but firm tone, she said, "If you still plan to write a book about Steve, you'd better start now." After that, more than 2 years of interviews began. Jobs promised the author that he'd set no restrictions on the content of the book and wouldn't even have the right to read it before publication. He only asked for one thing: absolute honesty. In these interviews, Isaacson saw an unreserved Jobs. He'd get furious when talking about past rivals and break down in tears when recalling the years of being ousted and missing his family. At the end of the interviews, Isaacson asked Jobs, "How much of your famous jerk-like behavior was intentional?" Jobs replied that he never thought of himself as a jerk. He was just forced to be brutally honest. In the epilogue, Isaacson tries to answer a core question: what exactly drove Jobs? He believes Jobs wasn't the smartest in the traditional sense. He didn't know programming and wasn't a top-notch engineer. His genius was intuitive. It was the ability to see through the complexity and get to the essence of the problem. It was the unparalleled sense of fusing artistic taste with cutting-edge technology. He believes that Jobs was so intense, passionate, and sometimes cold because he genuinely thought he was at the forefront of a historical tide. He wasn't just doing a job. He was fulfilling a sacred mission to use elegant tools to promote human progress. When he thought someone was hindering this mission, his anger would pour out without reservation. His sarcasm was almost always for one goal: the pursuit of perfection. In the epilogue, Isaacson compares Jobs with another giant, Bill Gates. Gates has extraordinary intelligence and analytical ability. He can quickly process a huge amount of information and is a practical, business logic-driven industrialist. Jobs, on the other hand, is more like an artist. He relies on intuition and passion. He doesn't pursue maximum market share, but product perfection. He'd drive the whole engineering team crazy for a perfect curve on a product. He'd be obsessed with the experience of opening the product box to surprise users. Gates created useful tools, while Jobs created desirable artworks. So, how should we finally evaluate Steve Jobs? Isaacson wrote that he was a man who perfectly combined poetry and processes with his imagination. With his roller coaster life and strong passion, he built a company with an immortal soul. He showed us how a creative entrepreneur could, like an artist, use his almost crazy perfectionism to change the world. He's not a role model to follow because his flaws are as prominent as his virtues, but he's a highly inspiring case worthy of our study. He proved to us that those crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who actually do. Yes, he had personality flaws and left scars. But the products he created have truly brought convenience, pleasure, and beauty to countless people's lives. He made technology have a human touch. That's the end of the whole audiobook of Steve Jobs. Thank you for listening. May we all be as hungry for knowledge as we are, and as humble as we should be. Farewell.